Selena, we thank you for being with us tonight. I know the weather was pretty bad, so we definitely didn't want you on that road. So thank you for joining with us virtually.
Thank you so much, Dr. Portery, for allowing me to present via Zoom. So that was a blessing when I received the call. So thank you for that.
No, we do believe in safety. Mrs. Davis.
Good.
Thank you, Dr. Portery. I would first like to say good evening, board, and thank you to the entire leadership team, executive leadership team, because this audit was just not the business office. We got information from every department, every campus. We went from attendance to grants to finances. We did it all. And I also want to thank Mrs. Lynn Nguyen, who is our comptroller, who facilitated and orchestrated the working relationships with the Whitley Penn, and also Miss Selena Saraceres and her team. They did an awesome job. They really looked at things from top to bottom, from left to right. They left no stone unturned, but we were grateful for that. As Dr. Portery said, it keeps us on our toes. But we received a good audit report, and I won't be long the time. I just let Miss Saraceres give the report that she has prepared for you all. Selena.
Thank you, Ms. Davis. And yes, thank you so much for providing everything that we needed and providing hospitality throughout the audit. Is this the presentation view, or you see only the one slide? Just the ones. Okay. All right. Well, thank you again. We'll go over the results of the fiscal year 22 financial statement and single audits, meaning the results of your federal compliance audits as well. You know, in the past, you've seen our opinion letters, and they're quite lengthy. They're three pages long. And this year, the opinion paragraph is shown at the very top, and that's a result of auditing standards that were passed during fiscal year 2022. And just a reminder that the audit is not an assessment of the district's economic well-being, but it is an evaluation of the reliability of the district's financial statements for regulatory agencies such as the Texas Education Agency and even rating agencies, more importantly, rating agencies. This audit started, the scope was from September 1st, 2021 through August 31st, 22nd. We don't assess prior periods, only to see when we're looking at cash collections, etc., historical information, but we're auditing a single year. We're providing you with reasonable assurance versus not absolute assurance, just because we would be required to test 100% of the transactions that go through Port Arthur ISD, as well as we'd probably have to live with Miss Davis and her team, and she probably doesn't want that. And so with that, you know, we want to make sure that your financial statements are materially stated and that the users of the financial statements can rely on them. So we started our audit in the summer. We identified key controls, tested those controls, not just over financial reporting, but also over your federal compliance programs. And in a few slides ahead, you'll be able to see the federal programs that we tested this year. And every year they're different based on the risk of the district, based on the risk of the program itself, and the level of spending that the district shows or results in for the year. The substantive testing is when we come back after the district closes its books. We're corroborating, we're confirming and vouching information. We're looking at the balances and then all of the transactions for the entire year. So in the summer, it's more compliance and control testing. And then when the numbers are finalized, we come back in the November-December timeframe to finalize these reports. All of this is necessary so that we can issue an opinion on your financial statements. The first type of opinion is the worst type, a disclaimer. That means that the records are in such bad shape that we cannot provide you with an opinion. The second worst one is a qualification, that there's a scope limitation, etc. It's not the best, but the best one is an unmodified or clean opinion, meaning there were no qualifications or exceptions to our opinion or numbers, and the users can rely on those financial statements. So I am pleased to report that the district has earned, and you'll hear me say earned, a clean or unmodified opinion. because as Ms. Davis indicated, it does take a lot of effort on top of their normal duties to make sure that this audit goes smoothly. And really, it's doing things right through the entire year so that when we get to this stage, it's not such heavy lifting, but it does require a lot of effort to get to this point. Because you do spend more than $750,000 in federal funds, we're required to add an additional layer of auditing standards called government auditing standards. And here we're required to provide a report over internal controls over financial reporting, not just over federal compliance, but also over compliance and any control weaknesses or significant deficiencies that we may identify over key areas. And again, no issues noted, no significant deficiencies or material weaknesses, nor did we find any issues or non-compliance with state matters. So for example, we look at procurement, we look at the Public Funds Investment Act, we look at the state spending requirements. All of that is part of the state report that we're issuing here. And again, no issues to note. On the federal side, you spent $33 million this year. And as you know, your ESSER funds are in full swing within the district. And you have, I call them oldie but goodies, your large programs that you always spend, your IDEA B, your Head Start program, Title I, etc. This year, we tested IDEA B, Head Start. And then there's two new programs that are new to most districts: emergency connectivity and then the school health support grant. Those are additional COVID related funding. The emergency connectivity is more related. It's similar to E-rate for technology infrastructure upgrades, and the school health support grant is for further sanitation, etc., and other COVID efforts. And of course, we know about ESSER, and we've been testing ESSER 2 and 3 as the district is expending those dollars. These are the areas that we look at, not just on the financial statement side, but also on the federal side. And so we're always going to focus on the top four: HR, payroll, purchasing, and AP, accounts payable. And then, of course, information technology feeds all of these areas. So it's very important that we understand the access rights and segregation of duties. On the PEIM side, or the Public Education Information Management System, that's what PEIM stands for, we take an attendance focus to make sure that the campuses are recording attendance properly at the attendance period. So it's typically around the 10 a.m. to second period time frame. And we're making sure that if there's any changes from absent to present, that there's proper documentation. So while we're looking for overstatement of average daily attendance, there could be opportunities for improvement where the district could be shorting itself. Not that that's what we found, but it's a dual purpose test for us to provide feedback if there are any issues there. And of course, average daily attendance drives your state aid. There's always that inverse relationship between property taxes and state aid, but attendance is key for you all to generate those state dollars. And then, of course, we're looking at the controls over every federal program and those very specific compliance requirements that the Office of Management and Budget from the federal government give to us on an annual basis, and we have to apply those requirements. These are the tests that we perform in the summer. So of course, we're going to look at the general payroll and non-payroll. We look at all of the federal, those federal major programs that we listed in the previous slide, as well as the non-payroll expenditures. We also use a software called Teammate Analytics. So we're just not doing random samples. We're also putting the entire population, 100% of the population, through the system. It'll generate risky transactions, and then we go ahead and select anything that we deem necessary. And I've also mentioned some other state compliance tests that we conduct throughout the audit. This year, districts across the state and as well as charter schools were required to indicate whether they did have policies and procedures over their state comp ed and bilingual education programs. In addition, they were required to report the allotments that they received and the amount that they spent year to date. And so what the state will do is they'll start their evaluation of how districts are spending these funds or the amount that they're spending, and placing that in their database for further evaluation. So again, good news. an unmodified opinion. So we also have to issue an opinion on those 4 federal programs that we audited this year. No internal control findings or non-compliance to report here tonight. Any questions before I move on to the financial analysis? Okay. So you have in your audit books, there will be 2 sets of financial statements, and so we'll go over them here. And it's a lengthier report, but we've summarized it here for you, very high level, and I believe it'll give you an indication of what's happening at the district. So the government-wide financial statement shows everything that the district owns and everything that the district owes to give you a net worth. So this year, the total assets and deferred outflows total $447 million, which were offset by $473 million in liabilities. So there's a net deficit of $26 million. And I know that's worrisome, but there's 2 things that's causing that net deficit that you really shouldn't be concerned with, that we'll see here in a bit when we dive into your general fund, that it's really not a concern. There's a few items in your financial statements, and we'll get to that in a bit, that you have long-term liabilities that are outside of your control. And those are the pension and OPEB liabilities and the related deferred outflows and inflows to those items. So in addition to the normal assets, cash liabilities, capital assets, and then your accounts payable, your bonds, you have these pension and OPEB liabilities that you have to incorporate into your financial statements, and that is causing the deficit. Also, you have capital assets that are depreciating faster than the debt is being paid off, and you'll be there for a while. And as you go through refundings, etc., it'll correct itself. But there's nothing to really be concerned at this point, and you'll see why as we get into after this slide. One thing I want to remind the district, and I remind all my clients of, is that these pension and OPEB liabilities do not represent a true cash liability like an accounts payable, a bond payable. This is your proportionate share of the statewide liability, and your proportionate share is determined based on the contributions in comparison or in relation to all members that contribute, or all districts and charter schools and state agencies that contribute into TRS. So this year, the pension liability totaled $24 million. And in the prior year, it was actually, this should be $11 million, and it was $21 million in the prior year. And then the OPEB liability, it stayed the same. So actually, your pension liability decreased about 50% from the prior year. So that 24 million should be 11 million. I must have not saved when I changed that. On the general fund side, you have, now we're going into what you normally see when you're looking at your budget to actual results. Your general fund revenues totaled $107 million, with 53% of that, or 57 million, totaling property tax revenues. And then your state aid totaled $38 million. So here you see that in the past, when your property taxes were a little bit higher, or you had the various plant in payment in lieu of taxes, your state aid would decrease as well. But now we're seeing that your state aid is a little bit higher, and it's been higher than in past years. This TRS on behalf, $5 million or 5%, doesn't really represent cash revenue. What it is, it's the state saying, district employees of Port Arthur ISD, we have contributed $5 million into your pension and OPEB funds on behalf of the district. And so you have to recognize that on your books. There's a corresponding expenditure of $5 million. So it has no effect on fund balance. However, we still have to reflect it here as part of your revenues. Then you also have your federal revenue at $7 million, with the bulk of it being made up of the school health and related school services, or SHARS. So that's the bulk of it, plus any indirect costs that you may claim for your federal programs. On the expenditure side, they were significantly less than your revenues, where you saw an increase to your fund balance of $20 million, which is always good news. I know that every year that we're looking at your financial statements, you all start gaining traction, moving in the right direction, and then there's another property value adjustment that you have to pay back those property taxes. But now you're moving in the right direction. So with the $87 million, 54% of that, or $47 million, is made up of instruction and related services, with the second highest category at facilities maintenance and operations of $15 million, and then the third at instructional and leadership, or $8 million. General administration is at $4 million, or 5%. TEA will aggregate this general administration functional category with a few other administrative functions at the campus, and the goal is to be at less than 8%. Currently, just looking at function 41, or general administration, you're well below that 8% threshold that TEA evaluates. Student support services are at $8 million, or 9%, and that includes transportation, which makes up the bulk of those student support services. If we dissect your expenditures by object type, that's what we call it per TEA, so it's by natural classification, payroll makes up $66 million out of the $87 million, or 76%. So that's where you want to be. Most districts are anywhere from 70% to 80%. So you're right where we see most districts. And then you have their contracted services at 15%, or $13 million. And then the other items are small items. But again, the bulk of your costs are going towards payroll. When we look at your budget to actual, you'll see that your revenue came in over budget by $17 million, and then your expenditures were less than budgeted amounts by $2 million. So overall, your fund balance increased, like I said, $20 million, which is great news. This brings your fund balance to $56 million. You have set aside about $11 million, the board has, for various projects, capital expenditures, etc. And anytime the board decides that they want to change the purpose, they can do so through board resolution, but that will remain in that committed category until the board decides to do that. The unassigned balance, fund balance, totaled $45 million, and we like to compare this. The unassigned fund balance, that is the fund balance that is available for appropriations. And so you compare that to the $87 million in expenditures. And if Port Arthur ISD continues to spend at the $87 million level, that would represent 51%, or 186 days of your expenditures. Meaning, the way I like to see it, if all revenues were to cease, how far would that fund balance take me? The answer to that is 186 days. The danger zone for any district is 30 days. For Port Arthur ISD, 30 days equates to $7 million, and 90 days for Port Arthur ISD would be $21 million. Right now, you're at $45 million, and as ESSER begins to dwindle, you'll have to evaluate how you'll use fund balance and the programs that will remain, or it could just be payroll that will be shifted back into the general fund. But at least you have fund balance to have those options, and so this is a healthy fund balance. I know that the audit is not an economic or an assessment of your economic well-being, but I can tell you that this is a healthy fund balance based on what the Government Finance Officers Association and TEA recommends, 75 to 90 days. And so that's your general fund. When we move over into your child nutrition and debt service funds, we present these to you as well, because you do adopt and amend budgets throughout the year for these two funds. On the child nutrition side, last year you broke even. This year you brought in $7 million and you exceeded your budget by $100,000. Your expenditures came in at $6 million, and those came under budget by $600,000. Overall, you increased fund balance by $700,000, and you have an ending fund balance of $1 million. There are some some operating transfers that have to be done for catering, etc., that is not allowable to be spent with the child nutrition program. So those are expenditures that have to be paid by the general fund. So this fund is looking really good compared to where it was in previous years. The debt service fund total revenues were $28 million, and those were more than the final budgeted revenues by $1 million. And your expenditures total $26 million. Remember that you levy property taxes just for the interest in sinking, or the principal and interest payments that are due on your bonds. So the expenditures represent just that, principal and interest on those bonds at $26 million. Those came under budget by $500,000. You also had a bond refunding that contributed $300,000 to fund balance. And so overall, your fund balance increased by $2 million, and your ending fund balance totaled $4 million. So all good news. Any questions for me?
Trustees, do you have any questions this time?
Davis, you want to end it for us?
Lena, for your report, and thank you, Dr. Portery, for all of your support. And we look to do the same thing this year.
Thank you again, Selena, and we appreciate all of your hard work.
Thank you. And can I
Yes.
log off? Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Bye-bye.
Yes. Bye-bye. Can I log off? She didn't want to stay with us. Okay. Also, on the agenda, we have National Black History Month in February coming up, and the theme for it is Black Resistance. So we hope, hopefully you come out to some of the programs that will happen on the campuses. I'm sure there will be many. We are looking at the legislative session. Our legislative session began on January 12th, and it'll end on May 31st. So it is interesting as to what will happen if you're reading and keeping up with everything. Senator Grant Creighton is going to lead the Education Committee this year. So that will be interesting to see how well he leads us forward. Also, another interesting thing that I think is interesting is that there's a $32 billion surplus that they're trying to figure out what they're going to do with the money. Now, you can take that as that's a great thing. Or I think they're looking at $10 billion into savings, $15 billion to lower property taxes. But that money is not something that's going to be there in future years. So whatever they do this year, they're going to have to figure out how they will sustain what they do. So whatever they do, we just don't want it to come back on us in future years. And they're telling us that we have to pay for things that they put in. $32 billion is a lot of money for them to try to decide on what they're going to do for us. Hopefully everything is in a way where it can be sustainable, but we really have to keep a close eye on what's happening in the legislative session this year. Thank you. That concludes our staff reports.
Thank you, Dr. Porter, for the staff report. Thank you, staff, for the reports. Minutes. Consider and if appropriate approve minutes of the December 15, 2022 regular board meeting, January 12, 2023 special board meeting, and January 17, 2023 special board meeting. You have a motion? You have a second? You have a motion and a second on the floor. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. Consent agenda. The following items, which are routine recurring nature, have been designated consent agenda items by the board president per policy being local. All of the items in the consent agenda will be acted upon by one vote without being discussed separately unless requested by a trustee, in which event the item or items will be withdrawn immediately for individual consideration in its normal sequence after the item is not requiring separate discussion has been acted upon. Trustees, I'll give you a minute to go through your consent agenda items. I'll call a motion that we accept these consent agenda items 1 through 17. Have a motion on the floor by Trustee Johnson. Have a second by Secretary Lofton. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carried. Personnel.
Vice President Borti, I've given you the list for teachers for approval.
Consider and if appropriate approve the appointment of teachers. Can I get a motion? And second. I have a motion on the floor by Secretary Lofton and second by Trustee Wyckoff Johnson. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Consider and if appropriate approve superintendent contract and related issues. Do I have a motion? I have a motion on the table by Trustee Johnson. Second. Second by Trustee Narcisse. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. Information, Dr. Porter.
Average daily enrollment 8,123. Average daily attendance 92.42%.
Thank you, Dr. Porter. At this time, we call for adjournment of this meeting at 7:05. Can I get a motion? I have a motion on the floor by Secretary Lofton. And second by Trustee Wyckoff Johnson. All in favor, aye. All opposed? Motion carries. Meeting is adjourned. Please be safe as you travel home and see you next month.